Part 10. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 91. We are lucky. Alpha civilization ruins of this size are usually full of traps, but here there seems to be no trap. Maybe it's because of the existence of that kind of monster that Alpha has relaxed its defenses here. After about 2 minutes of silence, an exclamation suddenly sounded. Jesus, what is this? The recording ends here, and the color of the indicator light changes to orange. Ian's cheeks twitched slightly, and a classic Chinese curse was stuck in his throat. There are two types of people he hates most in his life. The first is people who only speak half of their words, and the second. What a mess. Why are all these pieces of information missing? The information Lan wants, including how this team came to the island, how they discovered that the stalactites in the cave can restrain the seeds of erosion, and why they chose to commit collective suicide. These things are in there. Was not a word mentioned in the recording, and even if Lan didn't get the black box, he could basically guess about the information mentioned in it. Not only that, there is no clue at all about the underwater stone pillar with the giant eye carved in Collins's diary, the same sentence "leave the bed" that appeared in 3 different places at different times, even if Lan wanted to investigate. And he didn't know where to start. I have no clue at all. Lan squatted down in frustration, but when his eyes swept over the bones again, he discovered an anomaly that he had not noticed before. Lan suddenly jumped up from the ground and subconsciously pulled out his gun. Among this pile of bones, there is a skeleton. Its ribs are completely black. Although the toxic side effects of some drugs can also cause the bones of the deceased to turn black, the blackness is not so complete. The black bones seem to be leached from ink. Lan had only seen the same black skeleton in one place, and that was in the bottom cargo hold of the Pioneer icebreaker. But the black skeleton was just lying on the ground quietly. It didn't come alive. This made Lan relax a little, but he couldn't help but feel a little scared. If this black skeleton was different from the one he encountered in the cargo hold, the tools are the same. I'm afraid he has been killed by a sneak attack long ago. The black skeleton, the city under the sea, the secret words with unknown meanings, these visions were connected together by an invisible thread. Lan felt that he was getting closer to the truth, but the closer he got, the more, the feeling of biological instinct becomes stronger. He walked to the side of the black skeleton, put the flashlight in his mouth, put on a pair of gloves, and carefully pulled the skeleton out of the pile of bones. Only the sternum, ribs, and 2/3 of the spine of the skeleton turned black. Its skull, limbs, and pelvis all remained pale, and the finger bones did not mutate into the terrifying bone claws. Why does it feel so similar to the second remains on the coastline? The mutation process was also stopped halfway. Lan checked the scene several times, but found nothing similar to stalagmites. It is different from the cell assimilation mechanism of the seed of erosion. This mutation should be interrupted by the death of the infected body. It does not have a core as the body like the seed of erosion, only however, the black skeleton we encountered before was also incomplete. The head was cut in half. As a human being, it must be completely dead, but why is the situation of that skeleton completely different? Lan rubbed his temples vigorously. Is it because of individual differences? Or is it that the black skeleton was damaged after it completed the mutation and became like that? It feels like the second possibility is more likely. It would be nice if there were analytical instruments like those in biological laboratories. However, Lan thought about it again, and it seemed that even if the instrument was given to him, he wouldn't be able to use it. That kind of high-tech precision instrument is not something he has been trained for many years. Professionals, most people may have to figure out how to start it for a long time. He used a knife to cut off several sections of bones as samples, and put them away together with the black box. Then he walked around the camp twice more, and after confirming that there were no new discoveries, he continued walking deeper into the cave. Due to the sudden interruption of the recording, Kaylan is now unable to determine whether the cave leads to the remains of the Alpha civilization that is suspected to be a biological laboratory. After all, judging from the information revealed in the recording, the rock well they discovered is not there. This end of the island, if the ruins and the cave are connected, then the length of this cave is too exaggerated. If calculated based on the distance on the ground, it would be at least 20 kilometers. And this is still a straight line distance. If the underground situation is a little more complicated, this number is far from enough. Finally, what Kaylan was most worried about happened. More than 300 meters away from the camp, 4 forks appeared in his field of vision. Underground maze, this is very common in karst landscapes, but it is also the last thing Kaylan wants to see. He walked through the 4 forks one by one, but he did not find any sign like the entrance to the cave. If this was an ordinary cave, he might be able to judge from the traces that the entrance of the cave was where the team walked through, but this is a karst cave. After decades, the surface of the rock formation has long been eroded. It was so changed that even if there were any traces, it was impossible to tell. Getting lost underground is no small matter. The dark and cramped space will greatly weaken your sense of direction, and at the same time eat away at your physical strength, patience, and sanity bit by bit. As time goes by, you will fall into an atmosphere of anxiety and fear. The more this happens, the harder it will be to find a way out. Even the most experienced relic hunters would never dare to take it lightly when facing the underground maze. Many hunters enter the maze and never come out. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 92. Kaylan hesitated for a moment and then turned around and walked back, rushing into an unfamiliar maze without any information. This kind of behavior can only be done by a fool. He planned to search the camp again, maybe there were any clues that he had missed. Whenever you encounter a fork in the road during the exploration process, unless there are special circumstances, you must leave a mark at the fork that is easily identifiable and cannot be easily erased. This is the content of the Relic Hunter Beginner's Guide and is a required course for every hunter who enters the industry. Although these people are not hunters, since they are a field team, the training they receive will only be more systematic and strict than that of hunters. Even the entrance of the cave is marked with steel nails. There is no reason why these 4 forks should not leave any marks. Kaylan thought this, but when he shined the flashlight straight ahead, he was frozen in place. On the way back, there were 4 forks. Grass. A creepy feeling came over him. Kaylan slowly bent down, picked up a pebble from the ground, and threw it towards the fork in the road. The stone hit the cave wall with a crisp thud sound, and then was bounced to the ground again. These 4 forked roads are real and are not optical camouflage or anything like that. Is this the legendary ghost against the wall? I actually got hit by it. Kaylan took a deep breath and tried to calm down. Could it be another hallucination or something like that? If it was a hallucination, when did it start? Where did it start? After you leave the camp? Or, earlier? Kaylan swept the light of his flashlight over the 4 forked roads in sequence. Fortunately, these 4 forked roads were different from the 4 he had just encountered. Although things were still very strange, at least it was not to the point of being outrageous. Kaylan calculated the distance by counting steps. The fork in the road he encountered for the first time was 762 steps away from the camp. Calculated as 1 step is almost half a meter, that is 381 meters, and after he chose to turn back, he walked another 240 steps. That is, 120 meters. At this location, the original one-way road turned into a 5-way intersection. This passage is straight, without any branches along the way, just like the ice passage under the glacier ruins, so Kaylan will never and cannot go the wrong way. It is these 4 forks in the road, appearing alive on the only path leading to the camp. If the old dog were here, he would definitely talk about evil things several times in a row. Kaylan thought for a moment, turned his head again, and walked in the starting direction. After another 240 steps, he returned to the five-way intersection he first encountered. Fortunately, there was no change in this place. Then, he turned around, closed his eyes, and walked back while counting the steps. This is a very stupid method, but it is widely circulated among the hunter community. Old hunters often say this to rookies who are visiting ruins for the first time: when you find that you may be trapped in an illusion, don't believe whatever you see with your eyes, close your eyes, cover your ears, and move forward. Many hunters who did this fell into the trap with their eyes closed. However, there were also a considerable number of hunters who actually got out of the maze by this method. Some hallucinations disturb the five senses of human beings, but when people completely abandon the five senses, these hallucinations are of no use at all. 238, 239, 204. He opened his eyes, and what appeared in his field of vision was still the five-way intersection that had become somewhat familiar. The four holes seemed like four weird and twisted smiling faces, laughing at his stupid attempt. You, Mom," Kaylan said word by word, and pointed his middle finger viciously at the four holes. He suddenly thought of the memoirs of a famous hunter he had seen before. He seemed to have written this sentence in it. Real danger never waits for you to decide whether to face it, but it swallows you whole when you make the decision. Kaylan felt like he was being swallowed by this underground maze. I'm afraid he had already entered this maze after he left the camp. The old hunter also encountered the underground maze, and he only left 6 words on how to deal with this situation: don't look back, go forward. Don't look back, go forward. Kaylan repeated softly, okay, just be stupid, I didn't expect that the fool was me. He turned back for the 4th time, heading towards the 4 forks he had discovered at the beginning. What the old hunter said is actually correct. In this case, the more you analyze, the more chaotic the situation will become. If you are rash, you may be able to break this mysterious puzzle. There are 4 choices. After turning back 4 times, I chose the 4th fork in the road. Kaylan identified the hole on the far right and plunged in. After walking for almost 500 meters, 4 more forks appeared ahead. Kaylan stopped and carefully inspected the 4 cave entrances. There were no abnormalities, nor any valuable findings. It's better to choose 4, the road will be dark. Nearly 5 hours had passed, but Kaylan felt as if he had been trekking in this dark underground cave for a year. Counting from the first fork in the road when he left the camp, he had spent the past 5 hours totaling encountered 19 forks in the road. Each time there were 4 options, and every time, he chose the 4th one. Finally, what appeared in front of him this time was no longer a fork in the road. It's a dead end. Huh. I thought I would always be allowed to choose. Kaylan was already a little numb. It's just like those endless looping horror movies. In this dead end, there is a statue. To be precise, it is part of the statue. This statue was originally supposed to be a huge stone pillar, but now only the top is exposed. A lifelike giant eye is carved on the exposed part of the stone pillar. The pupil of the giant eye has a piece of ore embedded in it, which is emitting a faint dark green fluorescence. Kaylan sighed and said 2 words expressionlessly, my day. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 93. The beginning of the series of strange events that cannot be explained by common sense was the giant-eyed stone pillar that Kaylan saw underwater. Unexpectedly, he would encounter this thing again in the dead end of this underground maze. But it can at least explain why Collins has a portrait of this thing in his notes. He should have seen this stone pillar in the cave, not in the undersea city. But why does this stone pillar appear here? Could it be that there is a city right below this desert island? Or, that Abyss hatchery is under this desert island? So where the hell is this desert island? Kaylan is basically certain that he has traveled at least once, and there are only two nodes where the travel is most likely to occur. One is when he first saw the giant ice stone pillar, and the other is when he saw the giant ice stone pillar after he fell into the sea and passed out. No matter which node it was, in short, he should be quite far away from the anchor point of the Pioneer icebreaker. I hope it's a time travel on the spatial level, then at least I have a chance to go back. Kaylan thought to himself, if even time has changed, then things will be very serious. Kaylan glanced at the stone pillar again. To be honest, in the dark tunnel, there was always such an eye with a faint green light staring at him, and he always felt a little hairy all over, although Kaylan knew that this thing was just a statue, but the uncomfortable feeling lingered. He simply pulled out his dagger, walked to the statue, and pried off the glowing mineral. This piece of ore is about the size of a football, with an oval shape and a somewhat rough surface. Judging from its weight, its density should be similar to that of common 30-grade iron ore. Kaylan held the ore in his hands. Through the thick gloves, he could still feel a tingling and numb feeling in his palms. This meant that this ore had a high dose of radiation. Most of the stones that could emit light by themselves were radioactive minerals. Kaylan had already taken twice the dose of anti-radiation medicine before taking action, and also put on a protective suit found in the 776 Special Forces camp. Grumbling. Huh? What's the sound? Kaylan immediately pressed his body against the cave wall, holding his breath and standing motionless. Grumbling. When this strange sound came again, Kaylan instantly locked the direction of the sound source. It was the giant ice stone pillar. I saw that the giant eye that had its pupil dug out only had a black pupil left, and this voice came from this pupil. Did something happen? Kaylan looked around, but didn't find anything unusual. Grumbling. Huh? Could it be? He suddenly felt that the sound was very similar to the sound produced when the pipes vibrated due to the rapid flow of water passing through them, but how could there be water pipes in this place? His eyes moved involuntarily to the stone pillar. Could it be that this stone pillar is just a water pipe, right? Grumbling. The sound came from the underground, from far to near. In less than 10 seconds, black sea water was already flowing out of the pupil of the stone pillar. This flow of water is not big, but the sea water is not just pouring out from this hole. At this moment, the entire cave floor and walls, wherever there are gaps, are actually seeping water, just like the coming of a flood. The water level has already reached Kaylan's instep. Is this a leak due to disrepair? Kaylan ran back quickly. He didn't have any breathing device on him now. If the entire cave was filled with seawater, he would be drowned alive. P.S. I'm feeling a little unwell today, so there's only half a chapter left. I'm very sorry. Please understand. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 94. The rate of seawater gushing out becomes faster and faster, and in some places it even shoots out directly. 5 minutes later, when Kaylan ran to the fork closest to the dead end, the seawater had reached the middle of his calf. It was not just the dead end that was seeping water, but also the entire underground maze, and even the entire cave, everywhere. Seawater keeps pouring in. The piece of luminous ore that Kaylan pried off was like opening a main valve. According to the current flow rate, in half an hour at most, the entire cave would be completely filled with the crazy influx of seawater. You shouldn't have pried that unlucky thing. Kaylan wished he could give himself a big slap in the face. He almost lost his life when he pulled out a stalagmite on the ground because of his poor hands. Who knew that it hadn't even been a day? Actually, for the same reason, he fell into death again. He trudged hard in the knee-deep water, trying to recall the scene when he had just pried off the ore. Kaylan vaguely remembered that before he started, he seemed to have considered the possibility of a mechanism in the stone pillar, but it seemed that in his heart there was always a voice urging him to do this. It's weird. Kaylan is very clear about his character. Although he sometimes makes gambler-like decisions, he has always been very cautious when he is not forced into a desperate situation. It is precisely because of this caution that I was able to escape unscathed from many exploration missions. Logically speaking, after suffering such a loss just now, I shouldn't have acted so recklessly. Is it because the nearly infinite forks in the road have worn away my patience? But this statement seems a bit far-fetched. The more Kaylan thought about it, the weirder he felt. He felt like he was just like a puppet manipulated by invisible hands. He almost subconsciously pulled out the dagger and walked towards the stone pillar. Is it because that giant eye staring at me makes me feel too uncomfortable? Or is it some kind of psychological suggestion from the heart? Moreover, for some reason, Kaylan always felt that the glowing ore was very important in his subconscious. Glancing at the ore still held in his arms, Kaylan curled his lips helplessly. If this thing was some kind of treasure, why didn't he feel that way in the undersea city before? It would be okay even if the eyes of all the stone pillars were pried out in that place. Anyway, the sea is full of water. Alas, am I making excuses for the stupid things I committed? The water level has reached thigh height. This depth has brought great obstacles to Ian's actions. He no longer has the mind to think about these things. If he dies here, everything will be meaningless. He stuffed the ore into his backpack, kicked off the ground with his feet, and fell directly into the water. At this time, swimming was much faster than running. Kaylan rode his arms desperately, and at the same time pumped the water with his feet crazily. Crawling is the fastest among several common swimming styles. At this time, if he can gain one more second, his chance of survival will be reduced. Add one more point. Strange, almost, we should be at the next fork in the road, right? Just when Kaylan was thinking this, the water flow suddenly turned sharply and dropped him heavily. This is. Kaylan, who was a little dizzy after being thrown, climbed up from the water on his hands and knees. He suddenly found that he was standing in a shallow pool at the moment. There was a hole about 3 meters square directly above the pool, and the black sea water was flowing in. It keeps pouring out of it. And he himself had just fallen out of this hole. At this time, Kaylan noticed that there was a strong suction force coming from under his feet. He pointed the flashlight at the bottom of the pool and saw that there was a metal filter full of small holes underneath. The seawater entering the pool could pass through. After passing through this filter, it fell into the space below the pool, and it is precisely for this reason that although seawater has been pouring in, the water level of the pool has not risen. Kaylan raised his head, raised his flashlight and looked around. At this moment, although he was still in the cave walls were full of traces of artificial transformation. A large number of alloy plates covered more than half of the entire cave. A substance similar to metal foam is filled between the alloy plates, and countless load-bearing columns and beams form an extremely complex structure, supporting this passage that leads to more than one place. The sound of rumbling water came from above, and Kaylan knew that the cave above was flooded by sea water, and that the vertical hole should be a flood outlet for emergency use. This underground maze, could it really be the drainage system of the Alpha people? Kaylan walked out of the pool and looked at the sea water that kept hitting the metal filter. He was a little confused. Since there is such a flood outlet here, why did he do it before? Didn't you notice it when you passed by? Was it because it was closed at that time, or was it because the path he took when he turned back was modified again? But if this cave is really a drainage system, with the technology of Alpha civilization, it would be easy to change the channel to modify the path of the water flow. As for the numerous forks, they must be part of this system. If there are water pipes above, then this should be a dedicated maintenance channel. Kaylan walked around the pool and soon found a metal sign nailed to the ground on the edge of the pool. The sign was badly worn and covered in rust, but luckily the writing was still legible. It's Alpha text. Kaylan tried his best to express it in human language. Number 3. Reservoir. When a disaster occurs, it's only for use, Don't overload it. The third reservoir is easy to understand. It should refer to the huge water storage space under the metal filter. But what does exclusively used in the event of a disaster mean? Do you mean this is a pool of life-saving water? But all the water that is poured in is highly toxic and radioactive seawater. What use can this thing have? Besides, this is an island. Although freshwater resources may be tight, seawater is not inexhaustible. There is also don't overload, but Kaylan feels that his translation is not quite right. The last few characters have many meanings in this context, and overload is just one of them. In addition, there are also overheated, out of range, exploded, and hundreds of other meanings. This is the reason why the language of Alpha civilization is difficult to translate into human language. If it is just a pure text carrier, this language is extremely obscure and difficult to understand, but if it is converted into information and stored in the mind, it will become something that can only be understood but cannot be expressed in words, and overload should be the word that Kaylan can find in human language that is closest to its original meaning. But here, don't overload is not just the pool, but another thing that is not mentioned in the text. Although Kaylan didn't know what it was obvious that if that thing was overloaded, a disaster would happen immediately. Could it be that this pool is a coolant prepared for that thing? There seems to be no problem with this explanation. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-San. Chapter 95. However, since it is a maintenance passage, there should be an exit, right? There was a thick metal wall standing behind the flood outlet. Not to mention the passage opening, there were no gaps in the wall. Kaylan tapped it twice with the handle of his pistol, judging from the sound that came back. This metal wall is at least 1 meter thick, and it is completely solid. It seems that this number 3 reservoir should be the end of this maintenance channel, so there is only one other direction to go. However, Kaylan did not rush in and groped inside, and finally got out of danger. He just took this opportunity to organize his equipment so as not to be in a hurry when encountering any unexpected situations. Many of the equipment hanging on his body were washed away by the strong current. Fortunately, his backpack and fanny pack were still firmly fixed on the equipment belt. In addition to his own self-defense pistol, he also bought a lot of things from the 776 Special Forces team, the biggest of which were 2 Madman pump-action shotguns, and Kaylan also bought these 2/3 of the barrel of each crazy outlaw was sawed off. In this way, although the range becomes closer, the spread area of the projectiles will be greatly increased, making it almost impossible to avoid it within 10 meters. In several battles with the Seed of Corrosion, Kaylan had long realized that conventional firearms could not cause effective damage to it. Instead of doing this, it would be better to choose the shotgun with the greatest stopping effect as a restricted weapon. This is like in a certain action game that Kaylan has played. The character controlled by the player uses the shotgun in the offhand to beat the monster to a standstill, then quickly approaches and kills the target with the sword in the main hand. For Kaylan, that stalagmite is equivalent to a sword-like weapon with a final judgment in the game. The 776 Special Forces team is obviously aware of this. From the recording in the black box, we can know that they used the large-caliber heavy machine guns equipped by the fearless warriors to limit the nearly invincible corrosive seeds from the beginning. In the camp in the cave, Kaylan also found a lot of stone cones polished from stalactite, which must be the killing move specially used to deal with erosion seeds. Kaylan loaded the 2 shotguns with ammunition and inserted them into the holsters on his chest. From this position, he only needed to raise his hand slightly and turn sideways to complete the series of actions of drawing the gun, aiming, opening the safety and shooting, all in no time. More than half a second. Then, he took out 4 pieces of C4 plastic explosives the size of compressed biscuits, pasted double-sided tape on one side, and installed a timed detonator on the other side. Like bullets, C4 explosives have the same effect on erosion seeds. It's trivial, but at a critical moment Kaylan can tear off the double-sided tape on one side, stick explosives to the cave wall, and directly blow up the cave to form a temporary barrier. No matter how powerful the seed of corrosion is in combat, it still needs time to clear the tunnel blocked by rubble. In the pocket on his side, Kaylan stuffed several more projectiles, including incendiary bombs, smoke bombs, shock bombs, etc. Most of these projectiles have no direct lethality, but in the ruins, their effects are much greater. It's much bigger than a grenade that can only explode. After checking that the protective clothing on his body was not damaged for the last time, Kaylan began to move along the tunnel, but this time he thought of a way. He clung to the wall on the left, holding the flashlight in his right hand and pinching it with his left hand. A piece of chalk used for marking. Use the chalk to draw lines on the wall as you walk. In this way, it will be clear at a glance if there is any change in which section of the passage has changed when you turn back. This cave seems to be naturally formed, but in fact it has been completely transformed by the Alpha people. Kaylan even suspected that it may have adopted a modular design like Noah's Ark. When necessary, the connections between the various blocks, the location can be moved at will. Only in this way can we explain why the road to the camp suddenly disappeared. Wait a moment. Thinking of this, Kaylan suddenly trembled, and goosebumps appeared on his whole body. Since this cave can have such a design, could it be that the stone chamber under the glacier was also like this? Identical stone rooms, actually there are two. At first, Kaylan and the others encountered monsters and fought in the first stone room. After they left, the location of the stone room changed. The second stone room was moved to its original location. When they returned later, they actually entered the second stone room. No wonder there were neither corpses of monsters nor traces of battles in that stone room. With the capabilities of Alpha civilization, this design is a piece of cake. Although this can explain the problem in the stone chamber, why are other people's memories modified? Kaylan thought hard, although he knew that there was something special in his head, and here too it only happened after he came into contact with the stone tablet, and when they were at the giant gate, they hadn't even seen the sarcophagus containing the stone tablet. There are still a lot of doubts. Well, let's think about how to get out of here first. As he walked, Kaylan found that the condition of this maintenance passage was getting worse and worse. There were obvious signs of damage on both sides of the passage, and there were many irregular depressions on the metal plates used to reinforce the passage. It was like being hit by many hammers of different sizes. In addition, many load-bearing columns were bent and broken. There was even a small-scale landslide in one section. Fortunately, there was still a small gap, which barely allowed Kaylan to climb. Squeezed through. There seems to have been an earthquake here? Or is there a malfunction in the mechanical system used to move the modules? When the sixth piece of chalk was about to be used up, Kaylan finally saw a huge airtight door with a valve appearing on the side of the cave wall. Next to the airtight door were written several large characters in Alpha script, Level 1. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 96. This airtight door was very large. Kaylan visually inspected it and measured it to be nearly 5 meters high and more than 2 meters wide. The entire door panel was made of a dark green alloy, and an octagonal valve with a diameter of more than half a meter was installed. In the middle of the door panel, the metal handle is covered with rust. Valves with purely mechanical structures are not common in the ruins of Alvan civilization. Most of their devices are driven by energy crystals, even the doors are no exception, and the airtight door in front of Kaylan appeared. On the contrary, it is closer to the design style on the side of human civilization. Could this place have been transformed by humans? An idea popped up in Ian's mind, but he quickly rejected it, not to mention whether anyone had ever entered this place. Just looking at this, the degree of rust on the airtight door suggests that this thing must have been installed here for at least hundreds of years, and it has only been 50 years since humans came to Alpha Planet. Hundreds of years are still too conservative. I'm afraid it has to be tens of thousands of years. Kaylan poked the door panel with his finger, only to find that his finger was instantly sunken into the door panel. This dark green thing was not at all the original material of the door panel, is a flocculent substance similar to rust formed after the alloy is oxidized. As for why it shows this color, it must be that the formula of this alloy contains a large amount of copper elements. But that's not right. The metal plates and metal frames used to reinforce the passages in other places are not so rusty. Logically speaking, the materials used in this door should be better than those in those places. Why is this door so rusty? Kaylan pondered for a few seconds, and then said in a somewhat uncertain tone, could it be related to the thing behind the door? He glanced at the large characters engraved next to the airtight door, first level. Semantically speaking, these alpha characters should not have too much deviation in interpretation, but because of this, the meaning of these characters, the information that can be provided, is also extremely limited. Do you want to open this door? Kaylan suddenly hesitated in his heart. Before he pulled out the stalagmite on the corpse, it awakened the erosion seeds that had been in a state of suspended animation for decades. Later, he pried off the ore on the stone pillar, causing seawater to flow back into the cave, almost drowned in the cave. This time, if the door is opened rashly, wouldn't something fatal happen again? To be honest, Kaylan is really a little timid. As a relic hunter, cowardice is not necessarily a bad thing. As the old dog said, those who are brave will have died long ago, and those who are cowardly can survive until now. After thinking for a long time, Kaylan finally decided to give up. His luck seemed to be not right today. Who knows what monsters are waiting for him behind this door? By then, even if he regrets, it will be too late. Kaylan took out a circle of tape, tore off a few pieces, and pasted them on the crack of the airtight door and the hinge at the other end, and then continued to move forward. The sound of water flowing above the head disappeared. It seemed that the seawater from the outside was no longer pouring in. After all the seawater entered the reservoir, the cave above would be passable. However, Kaylan had no intention of going back above. After learning that the drainage system of the Alpha people had the ability to deform at will, the original underground maze was directly upgraded to a more difficult moving maze. Even if Kaylan had it in his hands with the design drawings of the construction of this drainage system, he may not be able to get out of it. After all, no one can predict when the water flow channel will change, and he knows nothing about the incentives and purposes of the change. In contrast, this cave, which may be a maintenance passage, is much more stable. After walking another 4 pieces of chalk, Kaylan was forced to stop. There was another landslide, but this one didn't leave even a single gap. A large amount of rubble blocked the passage so tightly that even the snake-shaped robot specially designed to explore small pipes couldn't get through. The only useful tool in Ian's hand was a folding pickaxe found in the 776 team camp. Judging from his physical strength, it would take a long time to clean up 1 meter of gravel. Take a full day. The previous section of the cave-in tunnel was 7 or 8 meters long. If this section was as long, Kaylan would have to dig for a full week. Moreover, the further you go, the worse the situation in the tunnel becomes, and it is estimated that there will only be more and more such landslides. Alas, Kaylan sighed helplessly, it seems we still have to go through that door. A mark was left at the landslide, and Kaylan could only turn around again. Following the chalk line drawn on the wall, he returned to the huge airtight door. The tape used as a seal on the door was intact, which made him relieved. According to the common plot in horror movies, the tape on it should have been torn by this time, and then something was added to hide it. Figures in the darkness and the like. However, this kind of plot is not surprising in the ruins of Alpha civilization. Kaylan has read many tomb robbing novels from the old era. Compared with the high-tech traps of Alpha civilization, the mechanisms of those ancient tombs are just it can be regarded as childish, and things like rice dumpling ghosts are even more insignificant in front of the erosion seeds. This valve is really high. Kaylan stood on tiptoes and stretched his arms as high as possible, but he could only barely grasp the lower edge of the valve and was unable to turn it at all. It seems that the data published in the official information is quite accurate. For Alpha, who is about 2.5 to 3 meters tall, the size of this airtight door is not exaggerated, and the height of the valve is also just right. But for humans, that's a little troublesome. There was no other way, so Kaylan could only use a pickaxe to hook the valve and turn it bit by constantly pulling it down. There was a tooth-aching friction sound between metal, and large areas of dark green oxide fell off. Fortunately, the mechanical structure inside the valve was still intact. When pulling the valve, Kaylan, you can also clearly feel the force of the gears interlocking. If these gears are as rusty as this door panel, then there is probably only one valve spinning naked over there, even if Kaylan rotates it hundreds of times. Circle may also open this door. Click. A crisp sound came from the inside of the airtight door, followed by a continuous sound of metal collision. Kaylan waited for 30 seconds before the airtight door opened with a snap at the crack. A very small gap. The door opened. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 97. A puff of smoky gray turbid gas was seen escaping from behind the door. Kaylan quickly turned off the air filtration system on the mask of the protective suit and held his breath. Then, he took out a test paper from his pocket, wetted it with water, and carefully put it on. As soon as the smoky gray breath came into contact with the moist test paper, the front end of the test paper turned black. However, within a few seconds, the ink-like black faded away, leaving only a faint gray-white stain. It's poisonous, but it's not very toxic. Kaylan then opened the filter valve again and tried to take a breath of air mixed with this gas. In addition to the pungent smell of the disinfectant in the filter box, there is also a fishy sweet smell that is a bit like copper rust in the nasal cavity. Soon, a feeling of nausea and vomiting came over me, and there was also a sour and numb feeling in my throat. Fortunately, no more intense poisoning reaction occurred, and it was only slightly uncomfortable. The 776 Special Forces team was equipped with an old-fashioned protective suit without gas storage bottles and oxygen generators. Kaylan could only bite the bullet and continue to breathe the smelly air. However, he still injected himself with 2 broad-spectrum antivenom serums and 1 hormone in advance. After all, even if the toxicity in the air is very weak, as time goes by, the toxins will continue to accumulate, and quantitative changes may also lead to qualitative changes. No wonder we need an airtight door. Could it be a gas chamber behind this door? Kaylan inserted a crowbar into the crack of the door, used the door frame as the fulcrum of the lever, and pressed down hard. Squeak! The heavy airtight door was propped open little by little. Kaylan didn't stop until the crack in the door was big enough for people to enter sideways. What kind of design is this? Kaylan looked at the scene inside the door with a look of astonishment on his face, and even subconsciously took 2 steps back. The door was opened, but Kaylan could not walk in because there was a cliff behind the door. As long as Kaylan stepped over the door frame, he would immediately fall into the abyss below. The other side of this door actually opens on a vertical cliff. Kaylan raised the flashlight and shined it into the distance. This was a huge underground space. The light of the flashlight dissipated after traveling nearly 100 meters, and there was no way to reach the other side. On this scale, even the giant stone door under the glacier was far from comparable. Such a big space, are the Alphas going to build an underground city in it? The flashlight could not shine directly in front or on the left and right sides. Kaylan could only point the light beam under the cliff, but such a pointing almost shocked him so much that he fell down. It should be the back of some kind of creature, with its well-jointed spine arched high, just like the top of a roller coaster's loop track. Kaylan has seen this kind of entertainment facility from the old era in the information. The largest roller coaster ever built by mankind is the Jindaka roller coaster located in the former Six Flags amusement park in New Jersey, USA. The highest point is 139 meters. From a distance, it looks like a roller coaster. Just like a giant snake made of steel. For this reason, this roller coaster is also known as the snake of the world. But if the snake of the world is placed in front of this thing, it will just be a slightly larger insect. Kaylan couldn't see the whole thing clearly. It was too big. Except for the top of the arched back, the other parts were hidden in the darkness that light could not penetrate. It's like a mountain sinking into the ground. It had iron-gray skin, and its surface was covered with shocking scars. Around the scars, something like blood formed large black scabs. Countless stalactite pillars penetrated its skin and were nailed deeply into the gaps in its spine. Each of these stalactite pillars was more than 1 meter in diameter, but compared with this spine, these stone pillars were as small as one. Like slender steel needles, they were densely pierced on it. There is no description of such a creature in any information, or even in any fantasy novel. Ian's lips moved unconsciously. He wanted to find some words to describe this huge creature, but found that the language was not there. It looked so pale at this time. It's the new prehistoric species. The prehistoric species, also known as the prehistoric epoch, is a very special indigenous creature on Alpha Planet. Each prehistoric species is basically a unique individual. They have no ethnic groups or similar species. On the ranking list of biological evolution, their close relatives and ancestors cannot be found either. These prehistoric species seem to have the same age as this planet, and a way of survival that is simply difficult for humans to understand. Even the only unnatural satellite of Alpha Star is a prehistoric species called Kaz. It lives in an orbit of 550,000 kilometers from Alpha Star, and relies on absorbing energy from the star. Energy to sustain life. Someone once said that if the myths and stories on Earth are true, mythical beasts such as the Suzaku Suanwu are almost on the same level as these prehistoric species. Regarding what was behind the door, Kaylan thought of countless hypotheses before opening the door, but he never guessed that there would be a prehistoric species imprisoned in the underground space of this desert island. He took out the camera with trembling hands, trying to capture the scene, but when he looked at the screen, he found that there was nothing under the cliff, nothing. The next second, Kaylan realized that this was an image from his memory, just like the city sinking into the sea. So, at least, there was once such a huge creature imprisoned here. Kaylan looked at the abyss below. The mountain-like back had disappeared, leaving only boundless darkness. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 98. At this moment, a strange warning sign suddenly came to mind. Kaylan didn't even think too much. He directly pulled out the shotgun on his chest and turned around immediately. A black shadow, a human-shaped shadow, stood behind him, staring down at him. The outline of that face was not very familiar, but it was definitely not unfamiliar either. Kaylan abruptly stopped his finger that was about to pull the trigger. Liao. Before he finished speaking, the dark figure quickly reached out his hand and pushed Kaylan hard. And behind Kaylan is the abyss that once imprisoned the primordial species. Boom. The shotgun fired, but because his body had lost his balance, most of the bullets hit the empty space, and only a small part hit the black figure. In Ian's last look, he only saw the black figure staggering. He took a few steps back and disappeared from his sight. And Kaylan fell straight into the abyss. Why? This question was the only thing left in Ian's mind. He even forgot the fear of impending death for a while. He couldn't figure out why Liao Zilang appeared here and why he pushed himself down. This can't be an illusion, right? That figure, is it really Liao Zilang? The wrist of his right hand was sore from the powerful recoil of the saw-barrel shotgun. Kaylan wanted to stretch out his other hand to rub it, but found that he had completely lost control of his body. The wind roared in his ears, and the weightless effect of falling at high speed made him feel as if the blood in his body was rushing violently, and his internal organs were torn apart, causing pain. He was still falling, and the flashlight had already fallen to nowhere, and the darkness swallowed him completely. The next second, a dazzling white light suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. It was like turning on countless high-lumen shadowless lamps in a dark room. For a moment, Kaylan even thought he was blind Gudong. The white light only lasted for less than half a second before disappearing. Immediately afterwards, Kaylan felt that he was thrown into the water hard. The strong impact was like a hammer blow, and severe pain came from all parts of his body. "You can't faint. If you faint, you're really dead." Kaylan bit her lip hard, her sharp canines even sinking deeply into her flesh. Control of the limbs returned to Ian's hands again. He struggled desperately in the water, trying to get as close to the surface as possible. At least 4 or 5 ribs were broken, and his spine seemed to be injured. Fortunately, he was not paralyzed yet. It was the left side of the body that collided with the water. The left arm and leg had completely lost all feeling. The right leg cramped even after a few kicks. The whole person curled up into a ball in the water. But what made Kaylan feel a little incredible, was that he was constantly floating up. He could feel a force in the water that was constantly pushing him back and pushing him to the surface. This can't be an illusion again, right? Finally, his body broke away from the water, and with a hint of the salty smell of sea water, the fresh air that had not been seen for a long time penetrated into the mask. Wu Kaylan took a deep breath and changed his position in the water with some difficulty. When he looked up, he saw an icebreaker anchored on the water not far away. "It's the Pioneer." Kaylan was stunned. It wasn't until the searchlight on the ship hit him that he reacted and vigorously waved his only moving arm. Soon, a lifeboat came over, and several sailors worked together to pull him out of the water. Kaylan. It's really you. But, why are you dressed like this, such an antique?" "What happened?" a sailor suddenly exclaimed, although he couldn't see it. He couldn't see the other person's face under the mask, but just by hearing her voice, Kaylan recognized her. It was the female first mate on the Pioneer, Caroline. "It's a long story, so don't rush to ask. I'm going to die," Kaylan said feebly. He felt that he was at a critical point where he would faint at any time. Okay, just hold on, I'll take you to the ship right away," Caroline nodded hurriedly. When Kaylan woke up from anesthesia, he found that he had been transferred to a luxurious box. When he opened his eyes, he saw a gold-rimmed crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling. It seems that he is really back. To be honest, he was really scared. After opening his eyes, he found that he was back in the dark cave. There was no light or heating, only air mixed with toxins and stones full of radiation. He wanted to lift his hand, but found that his whole body was wrapped in bandages and turned into a human-shaped rice dumpling. There were a lot of monitoring equipment beside the bed, and there must be at least a dozen bags of potions hanging on the infusion pole. "Are you awake?" a guy in a white coat poked his head over. "How are you feeling now? Don't rush to speak, just blink." Kaylan blinked. "You have 26 fractures, countless bruises, plus poisoning, radiation, blood loss, and internal organ damage. It's really a miracle that you survived. The medical methods on the ship can do this. The level has reached the limit, and if you want to receive further treatment, you have to stay in the medical cabin on the Ark for at least half a month." The doctor glanced at his watch and continued, "The captain has contacted the transport plane for you, and it should arrive in 2 hours. Can you help me call my companions?" Kaylan said with some difficulty. "You need to rest now." The doctor shook his head. There is something very urgent, Kaylan insisted. Just call one person in, that is, the guy nicknamed Hound. Oh, okay. Seeing Kaylan being so stubborn, the doctor sighed helplessly, walked to the door, and shouted outside, "Who is the Hound? The injured has something to tell you." In less than 2 seconds, the old dog rushed into the room and ran to Ian's bed before stopping. "I know you have a lot to ask me." Kaylan gave the old dog a look, and then said to the doctor, "I'm sorry, can you avoid it for a while?" As soon as the doctor walked out, the old dog hurriedly asked, "What happened to you down there? What happened to your equipment, and those things in your backpack, those antiques from decades ago? Don't worry, tell me first, how many hours have passed since I entered the water?" Kaylan asked. "Excluding the time of your operation, 4 hours have passed from the time you entered the water to the time you reappeared. We all thought you were dead." 4 hours, Kaylan was slightly stunned. It seemed that his guess was right. There were indeed some problems with time and space on that island. He spent at least a day and a night, but for Laugo and the others, there was only 4 hours. "Old dog, you said you thought I was dead, then, where is Liao Zilang?" "He was rescued 10 minutes after he entered the water. His water ability is much better than yours, but at that time you were directly swept away by the undercurrent." Kaylan was silent for a moment. If Liao Zilang escaped just after encountering an undercurrent underwater, then what did he encounter underground on the island? And, the undercurrent, why didn't he feel anything at that time? Kaylan clearly remembered that he suddenly saw the giant ice stone pillar during a calm dive, and there was no undercurrent at all. "You should answer my question. Do you want to rush me to death?" "Old dog, before that, I need you to confirm something very important," Kaylan said solemnly. "It's very important," he emphasized again. Say, seeing Ian's expression, the old dog suddenly became serious. "Do you have any way to confirm Liao Zilang's identity?" "What's the meaning?" "I suspect, the Liao Zilang you rescued may not be the person who went into the water with me." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 99. Is there any evidence? The old dog looked a little ugly. "I have never doubted your identity. Likewise, I will not doubt Liao Zilang. He has been following me for so many years, and I know him very well." "Then are you sure that Liao Zilang who came up from the water is the one you know?" Kaylan thought of the lump of meat that became exactly like a hound under the glacier ruins last time. This shows that the Alpha civilization is completely the ability to copy an exact Liao Zilang, but unfortunately, only he has retained these memories, and Hound and the others know nothing about it now. Kaylan, the old dog gave him a thoughtful look, "You have to know that in the eyes of people like us, you are actually more questionable than Liao Zilang. Do you know, the equipment you are wearing? Many of them were discontinued before I was born, and you may not even be able to find them in those thrift stores on the black market." He paused and continued, "At first, we thought you found an exploration team that died a long time ago underwater, but the problem is, those equipment are not used to perform underwater exploration missions at all, and that diary." He shook his head, "There's no way to explain it. Before you wake up, we can't explain the origin of those things at all, but at least we can help you keep the secret. Otherwise, it's not us who are guarding the corridor outside now." He is now an agent of the Security Bureau. Hound pulled a stool and sat down by the bed. "When you were swept away by the undercurrent, Liao Zilang almost took his own life to save you. You shouldn't doubt him, or say, you have to give me a reason that is enough to convince me." "Okay, I'll tell you everything. Wait a minute, is there a monitoring device in this room?" Kaylan raised his head with some effort and looked around. "Yes." Hound reached into his pocket and took out several bugs, "but we had already dismantled them before you came in." "That's good, No matter what I say next, don't be too surprised, although I know that those things sound like fantasy. You said it, the Hound nodded. From seeing the giant ice stone pillar, to entering the abyss hatchery, encountering the fusion body, and then falling into the deep sea and arriving at that desert island inexplicably, until he opened the airtight door and was killed by that black man the shadow pushed down the cliff. Except for those things that only he could see, Kaylan described everything he had experienced in detail. The expression on the Hound's face was extremely strange. It was obvious that he wanted to interrupt Ian's narration more than once, but in the end he held back. It wasn't until Kaylan finished speaking that he opened his mouth in confusion, but couldn't say a single word. Didn't ask. After a long silence, he suddenly said, "To be honest, I don't dare to shoot movies like this these days, but the things you brought back made me believe it." He turned his head to look at the closed door behind him, then back again, and said word by word, "You mean, you finally saw Liao Zilang suddenly appear in that tunnel, and then he pushed you off a cliff, right?" "Right. Are you sure you saw it correctly? Is it possible it's an hallucination or something?" "The possibility of hallucinations cannot be ruled out, but I think it is necessary to verify Liao Zilang's identity. Of course, if you are worried about me, you can also verify whether I am really Kaylan," Kaylan said. "How many shots did the doctor shoot at Zhonglian at the A-087 ruins?" "2 shots. The shot area?" "They were all in the torso and back. 1 shot hit the heart." I was still asking him why he didn't shoot in the leg. I was very impressed by this. "Let's change the question." "No need," Hound nodded. "I understand, just wait for me for a moment, I'll be back soon." After saying that, he opened the door and walked out. In less than 10 minutes, the Hound came back. He and Kaylan looked at each other and shook their heads. "There is no problem with Liao Zilang's identity." "That's good." However, I discovered something else as he said that. He handed the tablet in front of Ian's eyes. What appeared on the screen was a paper file that looked a bit old. It was filled with seals with the words "Top Secret" and "Voided." When Kaylan saw the file at first glance, he was attracted by the words in the upper right corner. The photo grabs most of the attention. In the photo is a young man whose appearance is 70% similar to Liao Zilang's. Who is this? Ian's eyes moved to the name column, only to find that it had been smeared with ink. Not only that, but there were traces of such smearing everywhere in other places as well. "Liao Xing, Liao Zilang's grandfather," Hound said, "former member of the ZDU Special Forces, in 902. That is, 48 years ago, he was transferred to the 776th Special Forces team. In the same year, MIA. Could it be that the one who pushed me down?" Kaylan swallowed subconsciously. Is Liao Zilang's grandfather? It should be. After all, you found the 776 Special Forces team that had been missing for 48 years on that island, and Liao Xing should be among them, Hound nodded. "But, the rest of the team is dead. How did he survive in that place for so many years, and he doesn't look old at all?" Kaylan paused at this point. "He has confirmed that the speed of time on that island is different from that of the outside world, but this only refers to relative time and will not have any impact on things on the island. Otherwise, those 776 special effects, the corpses of the squad soldiers simply don't turn into skeletons, and the fabric they wear doesn't rot. I don't know about this. I want to find out the last mission performed by the 776 Special Forces team." "Have you found it?" "No." Hound shook his head with some regret. "I thought at first I didn't have enough permissions, but I soon discovered that it was not a question of permissions, but that the last mission they performed did not exist in the archives. Either it was never recorded in the first place, or it was deleted. Old dog, I think he may not be a human being anymore, at least, not a normal human being. But have you ever thought that he may not want to kill you?" According to what you said, After you were pushed off the cliff, you mysteriously appeared on the sea around the Pioneer. If it hadn't been for his push, you might still be trapped in that tunnel. From this perspective, does his action count as, to save you from that hellish place? Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 100. Kaylan didn't answer immediately. He kept recalling those few seconds. In fact, due to the light, he couldn't see the other person's face and the expression on his face clearly, and the other party didn't make any sound. The voice pushed him down without saying a word. Although I can't remember the falling process clearly, the drop was at least several hundred meters, which, including the acceleration of gravity, was enough to make Kaylan shatter into pieces the moment he hit the water. But he wasn't dead, just had a few broken bones. There's something wrong with that place. Kaylan said to himself, at that height, I will definitely die, but why? He didn't tell the Hound about the illusion, but if that space was used to imprison the creature that seemed to be a prehistoric species, how could there be sea water underneath, and how could he appear above the sea? Kaylan felt that his head was in complete chaos. All kinds of clues and information were piled on the ground like countless puzzle pieces. From each piece, he could glimpse a small part of the truth, but he just couldn't help it. Join these pieces together to form a complete picture. I have already told the others that the operation is suspended, and we will take the transport plane back to the Ark with you. You need to recover from your injuries first, and we will talk about other things later, the Hound said, and was about to get up, but just before at this time, a knock on the door suddenly rang. Mr. Kaylan, are you awake? First Officer Caroline's voice came from outside. Yes, he's awake. Hound opened the door and let Caroline in. Caroline was wearing an orange-red one-piece protective suit and a pair of long-sealed boots. She had obviously just come off the deck. She was holding a thin document in her arms and looked like, it seems a little unnatural. What's wrong? Kaylan asked, turning his face slightly to look at Caroline. The plane to pick you up has arrived. Caroline said, suddenly swallowing a mouthful of saliva. That black skeleton that was sent back before, the relevant analysis report has also come out. Analysis report? Didn't it say it would be out tomorrow? Why is it a whole day early? Kaylan was a little surprised. I mean the people at the Institute, after they got the things, they conducted a gene comparison experiment as usual, and then hurriedly sent the report over. Caroline said intermittently, she as if he was considering his tone. He said, that, something is a little wrong. What's wrong? Kaylan asked quickly. The Research Institute didn't even have time to do a complete test and just sent the report in such a hurry. It must have made a very important discovery. Caroline hesitated for a few seconds before speaking. The things in the black skeleton are those translucent substances that look like slugs. The people at the Institute extracted its DNA, and after comparing it seemed that even she couldn't believe it. After taking several deep breaths, Caroline said with some difficulty, its genetic material is 99.92% similar to humans and us. The genetic material similarity is 99.92%, anyone who has completed the compulsory education process for the new generation of Ark will understand what this means. This creature is actually a human being. In other words, this thing, he and Kaylan, the Hound, Caroline, and all the people on this boat are of the same species. You know, the genetic similarity between human blood relatives is almost 99.95%, while the chimpanzee, the species that is said to be biologically closest to humans, has only 98.8% genetic similarity with humans. This means that there is not even reproductive isolation between humans and that thing. How is this possible? This is absolutely impossible. The Hound was stunned for a moment, and then said immediately, you mean, that thing is a human being? He pointed to his nose, with a look of astonishment on his face. Is it our kind? Then something like a slug. One of my kind. Judging from this comparison report alone, It's true. Caroline nodded silently. It seemed that this incident had a big impact on her. Did they make a mistake? Did the people at the institute get the wrong specimen? Did someone accidentally get their own blood in? The hound still couldn't believe it. In his opinion, this matter even more outrageous than Ian's experiences. They thought so at first, and then conducted 3 identical comparison experiments, and the results were all the same. Caroline handed the document in her hand to the hound. Well, as someone who has witnessed it with her own eyes, as for that thing, I myself cannot accept this fact. The captain has ordered this matter to be classified as the top secret of the entire consortium, and is trying to find a way to bypass the Security Bureau and directly communicate with the Institute. Get in touch with someone. The word Research Institute without any prefix refers only to the Noah Core Research Institute, which represents the highest technological level in all mankind and the official authority of ARC. It is understandable for the Soma Foundation to do this. If there are no problems with this report, then this matter is no longer something that a consortium like them can solve. However, Kaylan, who was lying on his back on the bed, thought of other things: the black skeleton, human beings, the black skeleton in the 776 Special Team Camp, and the person who pushed himself off the cliff, suspected of being Liao Xin, mysterious black shadow. There seems to be an invisible thread connecting these clues together. There is also the code word "leave the bed" with unknown meaning, which appears in 3 places in total: on the inner shell of the diving cabin, on Collins's log, and on the password to open the black box of the 776 Special Forces team. From this point of view, the first "leave the bed" was probably made by the black skeleton. So what message does it want to convey to them? However, since this black skeleton wanted them to see this line of text, why did it attack them? If it successfully killed Kaylan and others who entered the cargo hold, then why would it need to carve those words in the diving cabin? This is the first place that doesn't make sense. Just when Kaylan was about to change his mind, the scene from the previous fight with the black skeleton came to his mind again. He suddenly discovered that there was a detail that he seemed to have overlooked. The target of that black skeleton's attack was himself from the beginning. In the first confrontation, Asano Akira stood in front of him, and after that, the black skeletons were all trying to attack him, but Asano Akira took the initiative to stop him. Coupled with the subsequent invasion of consciousness, that fatal black hole of thinking, Kaylan suddenly came up with an extremely bold idea. Could he be mistaken for an alpha person by the black skeleton because he had the language ability of the alpha civilization? Does it want to kill itself to protect others? From its perspective, it was itself, the alien, who held several other people hostage. As long as it could kill itself, it could save the others. However, Kaylan didn't use those abilities at the beginning. Kaylan felt that he seemed to have completed one corner of the puzzle, but just when he was about to get a glimpse of part of the truth, the crucial piece could not be found.